Hey and welcome, I'm Hammeh and today we'll be taking a look at Overwatch's 12th digital comic, Uprising, in which we learn loads of things about Overwatch as an organisation, its command and members, as they're at their Swiss headquarters and in the field, while the King's Row Uprising enters its 28th day of chaos in London. We'll be taking a quick look through talking points and interesting bits of the comic, along with a little light speculation on what new Overwatch story and lore we may have learned from it too. Suffice to say, this contains massive spoilers. The link for the comic's in the description below if you haven't read it already, or head to comic.playoverwatch.com. Please read it first if you haven't already, then come back here, watch this, and let me know your thoughts. Firstly, a quick summary of the story. We see McCree in London, England, reporting on an organisation called Null Sector. Extremist Omnics to some, terrorists to others. They're currently holding Mondata, Mayor Nanda, and 100 prisoners in the power plant in King's Row after what seems to have been 27 days of activity. Showing the air defences, McCree then comes under attack. Whilst at Overwatch HQ in Switzerland, we see the command, Morrison, Amari and Reyes watching on. An argument erupts between the three as to why McCree is in London in the first place. Overwatch aren't supposed to be operating there, and Blackwatch is suspended at this point. Reyes is clearly taking glee at not telling the Overwatch command his reasoning, and the reasons for McCree's presence. As Morrison and Amari debate the morals of taking action against defying orders, Morrison heads to the Overwatch Training and Evaluation Centre, where we see a young Lena Oxton in action against a familiar cyborg ninja dude. As Tracer is past fit for active duty, if Morrison so chooses to deploy her, he's again reminded by Mercy of the moral implications of not intervening in the King's Row Uprising, which has nearly been going on for a month, with thousands of people apparently needing medical attention. Burdened by the media storm around Blackwatch's existence, pressure on Overwatch, a failed mission in Egypt and other things, Morrison takes a few minutes to himself before finding common ground with Tracer. Both have a desire to help make the world better and have been put through challenging situations to try and do so. Hers was recovering from her chronal disassociation, his through the seemingly tough time that he insinuates that Reyes and himself experienced in the US Soldier Enhancement Program. As Tracer reminds him that he still has a chance to make a difference, like he did when the Overwatch original strike team was given one too, Morrison dismisses her, has a change of heart, and avoids a call from Overwatch director, presumably Petrus, that may well be reinforcing an order not to engage or deploy. We then see the veterans still in action and preparing for it, Torbjorn and Reinhardt, as they prepare for the mission with Mercy in what must be an Overwatch combat or mission colour scheme before Cadet Oxton, past fit for duty, goes on what may be her first Overwatch mission. Looked after by Mercy, Tracer is left pondering Torbjorn's slightly cold greeting, but the cavalry's here from Torbjorn certainly sticks with her, while we see Morrison watching the dropship take off, contemplating the consequences of his actions. Here's some of the interesting things I enjoyed from the comic and a bit of an analysis too. Now, the first thing that struck me was the overall state of Overwatch's command structure and how the organisation was portrayed just shortly before its fall. This is all set 7 years ago, so we know that Overwatch roughly fell 6 or 7 years ago. That's when the Swiss Command Centre or HQ blew up, according to Fading Glory on the Trail of Jack Morrison, an Overwatch blog that's been on the website for a very long time. As we see McCree's report on Null Sector, the extremist or terrorist group have been fighting in the heart of London for nearly a month. According to Tracer later in the comic, undoing all the progress England has made, presumably I guess since the first Omnic crisis, and destroying thousands of years of our history. Now to me this has echoes of the destruction of historical artefacts or buildings. That could kind of be like Islamic State's destruction of parts of the historic and beautiful site of Palmyra. Not long ago actually. McCree still looks to have both his hands here, by the way. I wonder if he lost one on this mission. He's then attacked by a perhaps slightly Bastion-esque in that it's got the single head eye shape and on 2 legs, but not quite identical unit. Now while McCree battles this bot, he's also not meant to be there, which is emphasised in an argument between the command. That brings me on to the state of the command structure of Overwatch that is apparent in this comic. It's very clear that Morrison and Amari aren't in control of Reyes' actions. If Morrison has a problem with this, it's not obvious here, but he does let it slide, whereas Anna is actually taking Reyes to task about it, questioning him, asking what's going on. Reyes is very gleeful about this, which strikes me, which I'll talk about again in a sec. Is Blackwatch out of control at this point? Reyes certainly doesn't appear to be answering to Morrison or Amari. Is he out of control? And if so, why are the two still working with him? The very fact that he turns around to Morrison and says, "Oh, there's nothing that you need to know about," with regards to Morrison's question about whether he's got any more assets deployed, suggests that Blackwatch and Reyes are kind of working on a trust Reyes type basis between Morrison and Reyes. Why is Blackwatch suspended at this point in time? Well, we know that in the later stages of Overwatch's history, the existence of Blackwatch became public, and it wasn't public in the past. The other thing that we see is a hint in the background of Morrison's office where we see that Blackwatch is kind of under suspicion or under questioning due to an incident in Japan. We don't know what that incident is, who knows, maybe we'll find out later. Moving away from the command, the state of Overwatch Overwatch as an organisation, and the position it's in is made very clear in this comic too. They're not authorised to operate in England. This is cited at least twice. Overwatch has been accused in past blogs that we've seen on the lore of violating sovereignty of nations. So, given that Morrison eventually deploys the team at the end of this comic, this is clearly a pre-fall example of that, and given that Blackwatch are active in Japan, maybe that's another example too. In Morrison's office, we see on his wall in the background the multiple accusations and media articles and problems Overwatch is having. Branded as anti-progress and anti-sovereignty, we also see that Blackwatch is under scrutiny after a complaint from the Japanese government. Now, who knows what this was, as I said. An Overwatch official has also been murdered in Egypt, and when Morrison talks to Mercy, she says that King's Row could be like Egypt all over again. Overwatch don't have the resources to deal with another humanitarian crisis, which again begs the question, what happened in Egypt, and how did the Overwatch official get murdered? Finally, you can see notes on the King's Row Uprising and the fact that it's been running 27 days. That's where Mercy's thousands of people needing medical attention statement has come from. If the British haven't sorted this in a month, it does give context to the whole urgency to act, and also the strength of feeling of the British Prime Minister that they're telling Overwatch they still can't intervene. Morrison says to Anna that he can't afford another PR nightmare, and we get hints from all of this as to the background under which Overwatch is operating in what might be its final year, or maybe even final months. Finally, Director Petrus is on the line, perhaps of the UN. There is a line of command above Morrison and Reyes and Amari. The Petrus Act, as we saw in Recall, was what made all Overwatch activity illegal. So in the end, if this is the same Petrus, he's probably the same person who had to be the one that officially had to shut Overwatch down. We've known from past lore blogs that in its final years, Overwatch was beleaguered from within and from without. This comic gives us further background as to the challenges Overwatch faced externally, and also some of the challenges between its command, and perhaps alludes as to how Reyes has been operating internally. Speaking of Reyes, the second thing that really struck me in this comic was his casual and joking attitude, with almost this hint of not caring. He does seem very devil-may-care at this point. For a man who wanted to get the job done in the past, he now seems very cocksure, almost carefree. He calls Null Sector extremists, Anna calls them terrorists. It's quite interesting, that point of difference in language is very much highlighted in the comic. Reyes says, "Sounds like the Brits have got this one under control." And then when Anna calls him a hero sarcastically, he says, "Well, I'm not the man with the statue." That's kind of showing his resentment perhaps at being passed over for command of Overwatch in the past. Remember, in the original strike team, Reyes was the commander. When Overwatch was established as an organisation, Morrison was put in command thanks to his actions in bringing the team together, and Anna was given second in command. It does sound as though that resentment is perhaps still lingering there. Although, why he's so happy or mocking now, we need to find out. As a nice little reference, we actually see the statue outside the headquarters that Reyes is referring to as Morrison and Amari walk down the corridor. Now, of course, this is the same one from the Overwatch unveiling cinematic, the same one shown in the intro reveal of the museum back at BlizzCon in 2014, so a nice little tie-in there by the artist. Now, a little speculation on my part here. From Reyes' tone here, he's still able to be jovial, sarcastic and talk to them. Might be a bit duplicitous at this stage, depending on what he's got going on in the background, we don't know, but he doesn't appear to be Reaper just yet, well, as far as we can see. Anna's reaction to him in the future in Old Soldiers when she says, "What happened to you, Gabriel?" If Reyes is Reaper at this point, physically, he's clearly able to cover it up in a way that he isn't in the future. Now, if Reyes isn't Reaper at this point in form, which I'm guessing and speculating may be the case, he's also not showing the pure hatred he did as Reaper did in Old Soldiers and post the fall. Then that dates perhaps when Reyes became Reaper, within the last year or so of Overwatch's existence, before or during the Swiss HQ explosion, maybe afterwards, but it hasn't been before this point of this comic, I would speculate. I've got nothing to confirm that, bar what I've kind of been speculating just now, but do let me know what you think in the comments below. Thirdly, this comic really shows us a bunch about the state of Omnic human relations, not just in London or the UK, but maybe how Omnics have been treated in other parts of the world, kind of badly. Now, Omnics have clearly been treated poorly in the UK. I was actually pleasantly surprised to see Reyes doing the historical bit here. This is just 7 years ago from Overwatch's present day or so. Reyes says that the Omnics built cities, they did the jobs that humans didn't want to do, and their reward was no rights, no citizenship. We've seen this compulsory registration and scanning from the teaser we saw on Twitter a few days ago, seen again in this panel, Omnics at gunpoint, under armed escort, being registered through this checkpoint. As I said in my previous video, it almost seems like an Omnic-style apartheid. They're almost being treated as lesser beings, or as a lesser sort of class of being, which comes out very clearly kind of in here, I think. Now, the Magna Carta is also cited. Fair play to you, Reyes, on your knowledge of English democratic history. This was signed in England in the 1200s between King John and his barons at the time, who were basically protesting over a lack of particular rights and the treatment that they and their people received. It's seen to many to be a cornerstone of democracy and civil liberties. Signed at Runnymede, which is actually not too far around the corner from where I live. The Magna Carta promised the protection of church rights, protection from illegal imprisonment, access to swift justice, like trial by jury, and similar such things. Now, as a birthplace of many such values as England, the irony of how Omnics are treated isn't lost on Reyes as he describes their current situation. And I think it's really interesting that Reyes, of all people right now, is somewhat sympathetic to Omnics or the treatment that they're receiving in this situation. It may also explain why King's Row is an EMP being directed towards Omnics in the underground as a payload. Feelings are running high either way. Finally, I also find it interesting here that Mondata is in London at this time. It perhaps explains why he decided to come to England once more in the future, 7 years down the line in the events of Alive, before his sad end at the hands of Widowmaker and Talon. Next up, we see some interesting insight into Overwatch's lineup and several of our favourite heroes and characters just before the fall. We get a bit of an idea as to who was active at that time, and of course a little battle of Genji versus Tracer. Jumping straight in, we see the Overwatch Dojo, the training and evaluation facility, and learn a little bit more about several of Overwatch's heroes in this comic. Firstly, Genji versus Tracer. Now note that Genji has a Blackwatch logo on his gear and is fighting with a lot less armour here. We can see a little bit more about how much at this point he has been cyberized. Yeah, these are all going to be skins, I'm calling it now. We've got Genji, Tracer, and more in the future that I'm going to show you. Now, of course, as a point of interest, remember that at this point, Genji hasn't left Overwatch still, and this is shortly before it falls. That therefore dates his wandering the world until he met Zenyatta, who helped him come to peace with his dual Omnic and human existence. All of that hasn't actually happened yet. So we're seeing Genji in the past, probably in a bit more of an angry state perhaps, probably still not reconciled with what his body has become and what he has become. Maybe if we see more of Genji, it'll be interesting to see more about his personality. Is that perhaps why he's in Blackwatch at this point? And he's sort of since mellowed out, become more calm and at peace, less rage since then, due to meeting Zenyatta. That'll be interesting to see. Tracer here is 19 or so years old. She has not long been saved from chronal disassociation, judging by Morrison's conversation with Winston and Mercy. That was caused by the accident in her slipstream teleporting fighter, of course. Winston has created the chronal accelerator, and apparently a great deal has been invested in her career, according to Mercy later in the comic too. Tracer is a cadet in rank at this point, not a fully fledged agent. This mission, I think, turns out to be her first mission. Now, Genji and Tracer have an awesome little fight, with Tracer finally showing us her signature backflip move that we've seen in a few trailers after a Morpheus-style "stop trying to hit me and hit me" from Genji. I think that's a little Matrix-style Beck in there. What do you think? Mercy and Winston's role is shown a bit. They are overseeing the training and testing. Mercy apparently does not know much about Tracer's condition just yet, and I really like this panel in the background on the right here, showing probably what is a Genji and Tracer model of some kind. Mercy says to Winston that time travel isn't an exact science, and Winston says that there are nothing too serious in terms of problems with her chronal accelerator. And when Morrison asks him what that means with regards to someone who can slip through time, he says, oh, there's just a few reliability issues to work out. Tracer maybe is still having some chronal accelerator problems, teething issues, maybe problems with managing it or using it. I wonder what they are and whether perhaps they'll come into effect in whatever mission the team goes on. I love the fact that Morrison knows Winston and the situation well enough to ask him the pithy questions that matter. This is cool for Mercy. We've not had a huge piece of lore for her, but this further fleshes out her background and character and personality. We see her role in the organisation and her morals, reminding Morrison that thousands are in need of medical aid, and instead of wasting time we could be saving lives. That reinforces her bio lore of why she joined Overwatch. She almost guilt trips him or reprimands him at the end. That's not good enough, Jack. People are going to die. So for all of those who have tried to call her evil, I think we have yet more evidence that her moral alignment is pretty clear. What's also interesting is Mercy's closeness to Morrison in terms of trust or confidence. For example, she knows and says to Torbjorn and Reinhardt that his decision making has been interesting lately. She also knows that Tracer's fresh perspective changed his mind on them going to help in King's Row, and she was also asked by Morrison to keep an eye on Cadet Tracer on her first mission on active duty. Mercy is also of course still on active duty here. We see her being dispatched with the team with her kind of beret outfit as well. Overwatch definitely have a uniform or standard armour that we see that they're being deployed in. And we will talk more about that armour and outfit after looking at Torbjorn and Reinhardt. Now note at this point that the old men of Overwatch are still not retired, both are still on active duty. Torbjorn is having loaded what looks like maybe a huge bomb into the ship. McCree does say at the beginning that to get into the power plant, Overwatch would need to blow the bloody doors off, Italian job style. Maybe Torb's just bringing the hardware. Torbjorn, character-wise, is questioning why only 3 agents are being dispatched, but doesn't seem to have a massive problem with that, saying that Morrison is being a little bit perhaps sentimental for the old days. He's not hugely welcoming to Tracer, interestingly. When she introduces herself, he says, oh, good for you, I'll be on the ship. Mercy does say he's always like that though, so hopefully it wasn't anything personal. Torbjorn does give Tracer her signature line, and I love this as a little bit of origin lore and story, albeit sarcastically. A new recruit being the cavalry. Oh, Tracer turning up? Well, that means the cavalry's here, everything's going to be fine now. But Tracer remembers it and contemplates it, so I love that little reveal of seeing where that came from. As for Reinhardt, well, he's welcoming to Tracer. What a legend. Welcome to the team, rookie! And look how amazing his hair is in this picture. That just really struck me. A silly thing, I know, but it totally backs up his pre-game interaction with Farah, talking about the poster that he remembers, and his hair was amazing. And we see the Overwatch mission and uniform combat suits all over the place here. The white and blue theme compared to the black and red colour theme of Blackwatch. Come on, in this event next Tuesday, these all must be skins too. So what have we got? A Tracer skin, Mercy skin, Torb skin, Reinhardt skin, Genji skin. That's at least 5. Who knows, maybe there'll be some more as well. And look at those berets and the little cap that Tracer has on as Cadet Tracer reports for active duty finally. So cool. Really can't wait to see some of those next week. Finally, this comic shows a bit about Morrison as a leader, his leadership style, the challenges he was facing in the latter days of Overwatch. Now, he still has a working relationship or trust of Reyes, perhaps even when he doesn't deserve it. We don't know at this point. We don't know what Morrison's attitude to Reyes is, but he is certainly giving him the benefit of the doubt or asking him a straight question, but he asks Reyes if there are still assets in the field that he should know about. Now, this is all set, as I said at the beginning, less than a year before roughly the Swiss HQ of Overwatch exploded in a confrontation between Morrison and Reyes, according to Atlas News' Olivia Shaw. My question is, how long before all this breaks, and how did it break? Did Morrison start to have suspicions after this mission? Blackwatch seems to be running on a Morrison trusting Reyes basis, or the organisation trusting Reyes to do what is right, and Reyes perhaps not reporting what's not accountable, almost a plausible deniability basis. Almost like Mission Impossible. If you fail, the organisation will deny that you ever existed. Now, Reyes doesn't tell Morrison perhaps what he wouldn't want to hear. It's certainly covert ops, as we know. It's interesting to see this insight into how Blackwatch may have been working, or perhaps still was working. At this point, I think it's safe to say that Reyes has kind of gone rogue. He's doing something that shouldn't be happening. Morrison knows this, but the fact that he doesn't make more of a deal about it with Reyes means that he still perhaps trusts Reyes' judgment for doing this, deploying McCree in a place he shouldn't be when Blackwatch is suspended. We also see the amount of pressure that Morrison is under. The frames of him sitting, tired looking in his chair, holding his head in his hands as the news washes behind him on the boards, as Overwatch is beleaguered from within and without, under siege by the media. The earpiece or visor we can still see on his desk that he wears, with some medals too. We can clearly see that Morrison is an arbiter or mediator as much between the top brass, Director Petrus, world governments, and the organisation's action and its ideals. He's doing a very political management role here. He still tries to play by the book, to Mercy, to Ana, to Tracer, until Tracer finally changes his mind at the end. It does look as though he's worn down by all of this at this stage. As I've said before, look at his hair. It's a lot whiter than it used to be in some of the golden age kind of poster style shots we see of him. However, at the very end, you can still see that there's idealism still there, even after all of this. As Morrison is talking to Tracer about her performance, about commending her, about her reasons for joining the program and her training, you can see actually frames from her little origin trailer from BlizzCon 2014 on his desk, the slipstream accident just underneath his papers. I really like that little Easter egg in there as well. Also, if you look on the boards behind them here, you can see some Overwatch game screenshots in the bottom right of the screen. Keep an eye out for that as well. When Tracer shares her reasons for joining Overwatch as an agent and wanting to make the world a better place with her idealism, I fought to survive, but I'm willing to fight for the world too, Morrison actually connects with that, recalling when and the reasons for which he joined the Soldier Enhancement Program in the USA. They were willing to try anything. Commander Reyes and I, well, they tried everything. That is kind of a dark hint into the extent to which stuff was pumped into him, as he says in a pre-game interaction with Ana. Reyes and Morrison clearly went through a lot during the US program to produce soldiers that could help fight off that first Omnic crisis years ago. Experimentation for sure, I think, but we're going to have to find out more about that in future. Nothing that refers to the Soldier Enhancement Program by Morrison really sounds very good. Remembering the photo that we've seen in Old Soldiers of the chance he, Amari and Reyes and the original strike team had, and of course the three of them in happier times I would imagine, Morrison puts Petrus on hold finally before dispatching his team. Torbjorn, Mercy, Reinhardt and Tracer. Probably he's going against an incoming order from Petrus not to intervene. Now, we never actually see the mission in this comic. I wonder how it pans out. Maybe we'll see in the brawl of the event, or maybe we can have a second part of a comic. There's another piece that we'll see about what happens on the actual mission next week, and I cannot wait to find out if that's the case. Wow, what a comic. If I've missed anything, I'll come back to it with another video. It was absolutely amazing. What were your favourite parts? What do you think about Blackwatch Genji? What do you think about the potential skins, Mercy's role, the morals, Reyes' role? What's going on with him there? I've given some of my initial thoughts here, and I know this video has gone on very long already. So do tell me, if you managed to get this far, what your favourite skin is that you think will be coming next week from what we've seen in this comic in the comments below. I would love to hear your thoughts. Thanks very much for tuning in to this analysis of Overwatch's Uprising digital comic. If you like this video, please hit that like button below, subscribe, comment with an Overwatch map, world, lore, or character story you'd like to see covered next. I really appreciate hearing what you all think. I've actually analysed all previous Overwatch comics, shorts, lore, and more in so many videos on this channel. So if you like any of this, my regular series of hero interactions, voice lines, Easter eggs, map lore, hero lore, and more, they're all in the playlists below. The links are here. Until next time, I've been Hammeh, take it easy, and can't wait for more Overwatch lore coming up. Roll on the King's Uprising event next week.